If the paperwork doesn't match reality, the money simply doesn't move.
And when the money stops, everything stops. So today, we're going to fix that. We are taking a deep dive into the source of truth for international construction.
The FIDIC Red Book, the 2017 edition.
And we are laser focusing on Clause 12, measurement and valuation.
This is the engine room. I mean, if you're in infrastructure, energy, heavy civil, FEI is the rule book. Clause 12, that is the mechanism that translates physical sweat into cash flow.
I love that. Translating sweat into cash. Because on the surface, measurement and valuation sounds so dry.
It does.
It sounds like just counting bricks. But it seems Clause 12 is actually a minefield of deadlines and traps.
It is absolutely minefield. It's not just counting. It's about establishing the truth of the project. So this deep dive, we're going to cover the strict procedures for measuring. And specifically the absolute disaster that awaits you if you just don't show up to a meeting.
The no-show penalty. I can't wait to get to that one.
It's brutal. We'll also break down the complex math behind new rates, how pricing shifts when the scope changes. And finally, a concept that feels like a glitch in the matrix, omissions, or how you can get paid for work you didn't actually do.
Okay, that sounds like a loophole I need to know about. But let's start at the beginning. The mission here is to understand the rules of engagement.
Exactly.
So, segment 1, the measurement dance. Clause 12.1. Broadly, how do we know how much dirt was actually moved?
It starts with the engineer. Under Clause 12.1, the works have to be measured and valued. But the initiative, it almost always comes from the engineer.
So they kick things off.
Right. When they want to measure a part of the permanent works on site, they have a mandatory duty to notify the contractor.
Okay, so this isn't a casual chat. It's a formal process?
Very formal. The text is specific. The engineer must give a notice of not less than 7 days.
7 days.
And they have to specify exactly what part of the site they're measuring, the date, and the time.
7 days feels civilized. It gives you a week to get your act together. So the contractor gets this notice. What's their obligation?
They have to show up. Sounds simple. But the contractor's representative, a quantity surveyor, usually needs to attend to assist the engineer. Well, the wording in FIDIC is that they must endeavor to reach agreement of the measurement.
Endeavor to reach agreement. That's very diplomatic language for what I imagine is often a pretty heated argument.
It's a negotiation. Is that wall 100 meters or 100.5? Did you dig to the required depth? You're there to defend your work.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate. I'm a project manager. I'm running 3 sites. I'm putting out fires.
Right, you're swamped.
I see the email for a measurement meeting on a Tuesday, and I forget. Or I prioritize something else. I pull a no-show. How bad is it, really?
It's catastrophic. This is the no-show trap.
Catastrophic.
Absolutely. Clause 12.1 is just brutal here. If the contractor fails to attend, the engineer doesn't reschedule. They don't call you to ask where you are. They just measure it themselves.
Okay, so they measure it without me. I can just object later, right? Send an email saying, hey, sorry I missed it, but your numbers are wrong.
Nope. That's the trap. If you aren't there, the engineer's measurement is, and this is the key legal phrasing, deemed to have been made in the contractor's presence.
Deemed.
And is deemed accepted as accurate.
Wow. So by being too busy, you have legally agreed that whatever number they wrote down is the absolute truth.
You've signed a blank check. Silence is consent. You lose your standing to argue because the contract operates on this legal fiction that you were standing right there nodding your head.
That is incredibly high stakes for a calendar invite. Now, does this only apply to physical things, like measuring a wall?
It covers everything. The clause specifically mentions permanent works that is to be measured from records.
From records. Like what?
Think about things you can't measure with a tape measure after the fact, like deep foundations. Once you pour the concrete into the pile, you can't see the rebar cage anymore.
Right, it's buried, or truckloads of spoil going off-site.
Exactly. You have to rely on delivery tickets, daily logs, so the engineer prepares the records based on those logs.
And the same rule applies.
The same rule applies. They give a 7-day notice for you to come and examine those records if you ignore that meeting. Deemed to have accepted the records as accurate.
It's a consistent theme. If you're not in the room, you lose the argument. But let's flip it. Let's say I do show up. I send my best quantity surveyor. He argues with the engineer. The engineer says 100. We say 105. We can't agree. What happens then? Do we arm wrestle?
FIDI generally prefers paperwork to arm wrestling, fortunately. If you can't agree, you can't just walk away grumbling. You have to initiate a formal process.
And I'm guessing there's a timer on that, too.
A very tight one. The contractor must give a notice to the engineer, setting out exactly why the measurement is inaccurate. And crucially, this notice has to be sent within 14 days of attending.
2 weeks? That's not a lot of time to build a case.
It's a sprint. And just like the no-show rule, this has a guillotine attached. If you miss that 14-day deadline.
Let me guess. Deemed accepted?
You got it. The door slams shut. If no notice is sent, you're deemed to have accepted the engineer's measurement, even if they were totally wrong.
It really forces you to be on the ball. You can't let paperwork pile up. So if I do send the notice on day 13, does the payment stop?
No, and that's a key feature of the Red Book. The show must go on. The engineer has to proceed to make a formal determination, which might take months. But in the meantime, the engineer assesses a provisional measurement.
So cash keeps flowing based on a temporary number.
Right. They pay you something so the lights stay on, and you fight about the specific difference in the background.
Okay, so that's the procedure. Show up or lose out. Now let's talk about the method. This is segment 2. The rules of the ruler, clause 12.2. This seems simpler, but I have a feeling there's a catch.
There is always a nuance. The first rule is simple. You follow the contract data or the bill of quantities. If it says measure in square meters, you use square meters.
Standard stuff.
But the real insight in 12.2 is about what you're measuring. The clause says measurement shall be made of the net actual quantity of the permanent works.
Net actual quantity. Unpack that for me.
It means you measure the finished product, not the effort it took to create it. The classic example is earthworks, digging dirt.
Okay, let's talk dirt.
When you dig soil out of the ground, it expands. It's called bulking. You might dig a 1 cubic meter hole, but the pile of dirt next to it might be 1.2 cubic meters because it's fluffed up with air.
Right, and if I'm the contractor, I'm paying for trucks to haul away 1.2 cubic meters, so I want to be paid for 1.2.
Of course you do, but the client says, I didn't ask for a pile of dirt, I asked for a hole.
And who does FIDIC side with?
The client. Clause 12.2 explicitly says, no allowance shall be made for bulking, shrinkage, or waste, unless the contract says otherwise.
So you get paid for the geometry of the hole, not the volume of the trucks.
Correct. Or take concrete. If you spill a bunch, or build the wall slightly too thick because your formwork was loose, you don't get paid for that extra material. You get paid for the dimensions on the drawings.
The net actual quantity, it basically punishes inefficiency.
It protects the client from paying for the contractor's waste. If you're clumsy, that comes out of your margin, not their budget.
Fair enough. So we've measured the work, we know the quantity. Now we need a dollar figure. This brings us to segment 3, the price tag and new rates, clause 12.3.
And this is where the math gets really interesting. And honestly, where the biggest arguments happen.
The basic equation is simple, right? Valuation equals quantity times rate.
In a perfect world, yes. That applies when everything goes according to plan. But construction is messy. Things change.
Scope creeps. So what happens when the reality on site doesn't match the shopping list, the bill of quantities?
This is where we get into new rates. Clause 12.3 gives you a mechanism to tear up the old price tag and write a new one. But you can't just do it because you feel like it.
You have to pass specific tests.
You do.
Let's walk through them. Scenario A seems obvious. I'm asked to do something that just wasn't in the book.
Exactly. If the item isn't in the bill of quantities and no existing rate is appropriate, you can't use the asphalt rate to install fiber optic sensors, for example. You need a new rate.
That makes sense. But scenario B is the one that confuses people. This is where the item is in the book, but the quantity has changed.
This is the most common battleground. Let's say you priced excavation based on doing 10,000 cubic meters. You have big machines, high efficiency.
Okay.
Suddenly the design changes and you're only doing 500 cubic meters.
My efficiency is gone. I can't use the big excavator. I have to use shovels. My cost per unit just skyrockets.
Precisely. So the original rate of $5 a meter is now unfair. FIDIC acknowledges this. But to trigger a new rate, you have to pass 4 separate hurdles, all of them.
Okay, let's run the gauntlet. What's hurdle number 1?
The quantity of the item must change by more than 10% from the original bill of quantities.
Okay, so if it changes by 9%, you suck it up?
You suck it up. 11%, you're still in the game.
What's hurdle 2?
This is a materiality test. The change in quantity, multiplied by the original rate, must exceed 0.01% of the accepted contract amount.
0.01%. That sounds microscopic.
It sounds small, I know, but on a $100 million project, that's $10,000.
Ah, Okay.
Basically, FIDIC is saying, don't bother us with recalculating rates for $50. It has to be financially relevant.
Makes sense. Don't sweat the small stuff. All right. Hurdle number 3.
This is the hardest one to prove. The change in quantity must directly change the cost per unit by more than 1%.
Cost per unit. So it's not enough that I'm doing more work. I have to prove that doing more work actually changed my unit economics.
Yes, and this is tricky. Usually, if volume goes up, your cost per unit goes down because of economies of scale.
Oh, so the client might actually ask for a rate reduction?
Exactly. This sword cuts both ways. But if volume goes down, your fixed costs are spread over fewer units, so your cost per unit goes up. You have to prove that math.
And the final hurdle.
The item must not be marked as a fixed rate item in the contract. If it says fixed, you're stuck no matter what.
That is a very narrow gate to walk through. More than 10% volume, more than 0.01% contract value, more than 1% cost impact, and it can't be fixed.
Correct. It prevents constant renegotiation. But if you clear all 4, you're entitled to a new rate.
So we've cleared the hurdles. How do we calculate the new price? Do we just make up a number?
No gut feelings allowed.
Yeah.
Clause 12.3 gives a hierarchy. First, you look for similar items in the bill of quantities and make reasonable adjustments.
And if there's no anchor, if this work is totally new,
then you go to reasonable cost plus profit. You open your books, you show what the labor and materials actually cost, and you add a profit margin.
How much profit? Because I'm adding 20% for my trouble.
You can try, but the Red Book has a default setting. Unless the contract data states a different number, the applicable percentage for profit is 5%.
5%.
5%.
In this economy, that feels tight.
It is incredibly tight. If your corporate overheads are 6%, you are technically losing money on that profit margin.
That is a massive trap. If you don't check the contract data before you sign, you're locking yourself into a 5% margin on all variations.
Exactly. It's a detail that gets overlooked at tender stage, but it bites you 3 years later.
Incredible. Okay, final segment. Segment 4. We've talked about measuring work and valuing work. Now I want to talk about the phantom work. Clause 12.4, omissions.
This is a counterintuitive one.
It sounds like a magic trick. Getting paid for work you didn't do. Explain the logic.
It's about fairness and sunk costs. Imagine you're a contractor. You win a bid to build a massive hospital wing. It's a $50 million job.
Okay, I'm popping champagne.
You hire a specialized project director. You rent a massive site office. You buy insurance for the whole duration. You have geared up for the job.
Right, and usually I recover those sunk costs by baking them into my unit rates for concrete and steel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now imagine the client walks in on day 1 and says, actually, budget cuts. We're canceling the hospital wing. We're just doing the parking lot.
Disaster. I've spent all this money to mobilize, but I have no work to bill against to get it back.
Precisely. If that work is omitted via a variation, you lose the mechanism to recover your costs. Clause 12.4 exists to fix this.
But to be clear, am I claiming the profit it would have made?
No, absolutely not. That is the golden rule. You cannot claim for loss of profit on omitted work. You can only claim the cost you incurred in expectation of the work.
So I can get paid for the insurance and the project manager's retainer, but not the $1 million of profit I was hoping for.
Correct. It makes you whole. It doesn't make you rich.
And are there conditions?
There are 3 main ones. 1, you incurred the cost. 2, the omission means that sum is no longer in the contract price. And 3, this is the tricky one, the cost isn't covered by any substituted work.
Explain substituted work.
If the client cancels the north wing, but adds a south wing of the same size, you haven't really lost anything. You can recover your overheads on the south wing.
I see. So this clause is really for when the project just shrinks.
When the scope evaporates, leaving you holding the bag for the setup costs, it prevents the client from gutting the project and leaving the contractor to starve.
It's protection against commercial drift.
That's a great way to put it, yes.
So pulling this all together, we've covered the no-show measurement, the net actual quantity rule, the 4 hurdles and omissions. What's the one big takeaway?
It comes down to discipline. Clause 12 turns contract administration into a discipline, not an art.
It really does seem like it penalizes the disorganized.
It penalizes silence. Look at the timelines. 7 days to notice, 14 days to object. If you miss those windows, the contract assumes you agree.
Deemed acceptance is the scariest phrase in the book.
It is. It basically says, if you didn't say anything, you can't complain later.
And on the valuation side, feelings don't matter. You can't just say a price is unfair.
You have to prove the 10% volume change. You have to prove the 1% unit cost change. It forces you to have your data organized.
It turns the argument from an emotional one, I'm losing money, into a mathematical one. Clause 12.3 says X, Y, and Z.
And that is the power of the FIDIC Red Book. It provides a rule book so you don't have to fight with your feelings. You fight with the calculator.
I want to leave the listeners with a thought on that calculator. We mentioned that default profit margin, 5%.
The default safety net.
In a world of supply chain shocks, inflation, and risk, is a fixed 5% profit margin a safety net, or is it actually a trap?
That is the provocative question.
If your company runs on 7 or 8% margins, every time you rely on that default rate, you're slowly bleeding out.
It emphasizes why you must read the contract data before you bid. If 5% isn't enough, you need to change that number on day one. You can't argue it 3 years later.
The devil is always in the detail.
And in the definitions.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into FIDIC Clause 12. If you're listening to this on a job site, do yourself a favor, check your inbox. You might have a 7-day notice waiting for you.
And don't forget your tape measure.
Always. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
If you're interested in the templates, please visit our shop. The link is in the description.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and see next time.